There's a question that keeps appearing throughout Baldur's Gate 3. A simple question, asked by an undead creature who won't tell you his name. What is the worth of a single mortal's life? Most players dismiss it as philosophy, a character quirk. But that question is the key to understanding everything. The conspiracy, the gods, why 3 mortals became deities, why those deities died, why they returned, and why their final plan failed. Because thousands of years ago, a god asked himself that same question. And his answer changed the world forever. There's a body in a temple beneath Baldur's Gate. It belongs to the architect of the absolute conspiracy, the mastermind who crowned an elder brain with an artifact that once destroyed a civilization. This person was a serial killer so prolific that Baldur's Gate's murders increased by 70% during their reign. The Flaming Fist never caught them, never even came close. But here's what makes this corpse fascinating. Depending on your choices, it might be you lying there, or it might be you standing over it, looking at what you used to be. This is the story of the Dead 3, Bane, Bhaal, and Myrkul. 3 mortals who became gods. 3 gods who died and refused to stay dead. 3 deities who orchestrated one of the most elaborate conspiracies in the history of Faerun, and who were ultimately defeated not by other gods, but by their own fundamental misunderstanding of a single question. What is the worth of a single mortal's life? Keep that question in mind. By the end of this story, you'll understand why it matters, why it's the thread connecting everything from an ancient game of dice to the fall of Baldur's Gate itself, and why the answer determines whether gods win or heroes do. Part 1. The Throne of Bones. Picture this: the grey waste, one of the bleakest planes of existence. A realm where color itself seems to drain away, where hope comes to die. And in the heart of this desolate expanse stands a castle, the Castle of Bone. Built from the remains of creatures so ancient and powerful that their names are forgotten, their skeletons now serve as architecture for something far more terrible. On a throne at the castle's heart sits a god. His name is Jergal, the lord of the end of everything. Every death that has ever occurred, everywhere, flows through him. Every soul that passes from life to whatever comes after crosses his threshold. He keeps records of it all. Names, dates, causes of death, an eternity of paperwork for an eternity of endings. And he is desperately, cosmically bored. Now here's where things get interesting. 3 mortals have fought their way to this throne room. They've crossed mountains and deserts and plains of reality itself. They've defeated armies of undead, skeletons by the thousands, legions of zombies, wraiths that could freeze your soul with a touch. Even lichers, those powerful undead wizards who think death is beneath them, fell before these 3. Their names are Bane, Bhaal, and Myrkul, a tyrant, an assassin, and a necromancer. And they've come to kill a god and take his power. Bane speaks first. I claim this throne of evil. Bhaal, never one for speeches, simply threatens, I'll destroy you before you can raise a finger. Myrkul, ever the scholar of death, promises, and I shall imprison your essence for eternity. The 3 mortals prepare for the battle of their lives. And Jergal just sighs. He rises from the bone throne, and his voice carries the weight of millennia. The throne is yours. Wait, what? The 3 mortals stop mid-threat. This isn't how it's supposed to go. They came here to fight, to conquer, to take power by force. And this god is just giving it away. I have grown weary of this empty power, Jergal continues. Take it if you wish. I promise to serve and guide you as your seneschal. until you grow comfortable with the position. But tell me, who among you shall rule?" And just like that, the common enemy is gone. The alliance, built on mutual ambition and shared purpose, shatters. Because here's the problem with three supremely ambitious people working together. It only works as long as there's someone else to overthrow. They start arguing. Bane believes the throne should be his because he understands power, understands rule, understands how to make people obey. Bhaal thinks it should belong to whoever's willing to kill for it, to take it by force. Myrkul insists that as a necromancer, as someone who has dedicated his life to understanding death, he's the only qualified candidate. The argument escalates. They're actually about to fight each other. Right there in Jergal's throne room. After everything they've been through, after everyone they've defeated. It's all going to fall apart because they can't agree on who's most worthy. Jergal, showing more emotion than he has in centuries, actually looks amused. "After all you have sacrificed, would you come away with nothing? Why don't you divide the portfolios of the office and engage in a game of skill for them?" So they play a game. First skull bowling, which gets interrupted by Malar the Beast Lord, who wants in on the action. Then finally, they play knucklebones. A game of dice made from Jergal's own finger bones. Bane wins. He chooses tyranny, strife, and hatred. The power to make others bow through fear. Myrkul comes second. He chooses dominion over the dead, because, as he points out to Bane with a smile, everything Bane rules over will eventually belong to Myrkul. All things die, even gods. Bhaal finishes last, and he gets what's left. Murder. But as Bhaal explains to his new partners, he holds the key to both their kingdoms. He can destroy Bane's subjects through murder. He can starve Myrkul's domain by staying his hand. In death, Bhaal has found leverage. 3 mortals walk into a god's throne room. 3 gods walk out. The Dark 3 have been born. But here's what they don't realize. Here's the detail that will matter thousands of years later, when their conspiracy finally unravels. Jergal didn't give up his power because he was afraid. The official texts say he grew weary of his duties, bored with the endless record-keeping of death. But based on what happened later, there's another possibility worth considering. Perhaps he was waiting, watching to see what these ambitious mortals would do with the power they'd claimed. Remember that. It'll be important. Part 2. Gods of Evil. What does it feel like to become divine? To suddenly sense every prayer directed at you? To feel the worship of followers you've never met? To have dominion over concepts themselves? For Bane, Bhaal, and Myrkul, it must have been intoxicating. Bane established his church immediately, the Church of the Black Hand, named for his holy symbol. His philosophy was simple. Tyranny is the natural order. The strong should rule, the weak should obey. Fear is the most honest emotion because it reveals the truth of power. Bane's followers attracted a particular type of person. City officials who abused their authority. Military leaders who valued discipline through terror. Slavers. Anyone who wanted divine permission to hurt others and call it righteousness. Here's what made Bane's church different from most evil deities. Organization. Where other evil gods had chaotic followers, Bane demanded hierarchy. Every Banite knew their place, who they commanded, who commanded them. Because tyranny requires structure. You can't maintain oppression if your own followers are fighting each other. Bhaal took a different approach. His church wasn't really a church at all. It was a collection of murder cults, each interpreting his doctrine in their own way. But certain practices were universal. Every cleric of Bhaal had to commit murder at least once every 10 days. At the darkest moment of night, when people feel safest. Not kill, murder. There's a difference. Killing can be justified. Self-defense, war, execution. But murder is when you end someone's life because you want to, because you can, because death is the only truth and you're its prophet. Bhaal's followers saw themselves as artists. Some specialized in poisons that mimicked natural death. Others made accidents that weren't accidents. Some preferred intimate violence, a blade in the dark. And all of them believed they were performing a sacred duty, making the world acknowledge the only certainty, that everything dies. Myrkul's church was perhaps the most overtly sinister. His followers didn't hide. They built temples in graveyards and catacombs. They wore skull imagery proudly. They studied necromancy openly, at least where laws permitted. Because Myrkul taught that death wasn't an ending, it was a transition. And true power came from mastering that transition. Think about the implications. Why maintain expensive living servants when skeletons never tire, never complain, never need to eat? Why fear death when you can study it, understand it, control it? Myrkul's followers were practical in their own twisted way. They offered a very tempting promise. You don't have to end. You can continue. Forever. The Dead Three spread across Faerun. They gained followers, and with each follower, they grew stronger. Because in the Forgotten Realms, a god's power is directly tied to worship. The more people who pray to Bane, who commit tyranny in his name, the stronger Bane becomes. The more murder committed for Bhaal, the greater his influence. The more necromancy practiced in service to Myrkul, the more powerful his domain. And they prepared. Because even as gods, they were still fundamentally the same three ambitious mortals who stormed Jergal's throne. They wanted more, and they planned for the future. Bhaal saw his own death coming. The sources are clear on this. He had visions of his demise, so he did something unusual. He sired children, lots of children, with mortal women across Faerun. These children, the Bhaal spawn, carried pieces of his divine essence. When they died, that essence would be freed. And when enough was freed, concentrated in one place, Bhaal could be reborn. Bane had a son too, just one. Iaktu Chvim, a half-demon born from Bane's union with a Tanarri. Chvim was powerful, cruel, devoted to his father's vision, a living backup plan. Myrkul imbued an artifact, the Crown of Horns, with part of his consciousness. If he died, he could retreat into the crown, whisper to whoever wore it, slowly rebuild his power. 3 gods, 3 contingency plans, 3 preparations for a catastrophe they hoped would never come. And then, one day, Bane and Myrkul looked at the divine hierarchy of Faerun and decided they wanted more. They wanted to rewrite the rules. They wanted to be greater than they were. So they stole from the one being no god should ever steal from. Io, the overgod, the god of gods, the entity who maintained the cosmic order itself. They stole the tablets of fate, the artifacts that defined every god's portfolio, every god's role, every god's limitations. The cosmic law, literally written in stone. And Io noticed. What happened next would kill the Dead Three, all 3 of them, and set in motion a conspiracy that would take over a century to fully unfold. But before we get to their deaths, you need to understand something crucial. The time of troubles wasn't punishment just for Bane and Myrkul. It was punishment for all the gods, because Io looked at all of them, at their constant power struggles and neglect of their followers, and decided they all needed to learn a lesson. He stripped them of their divine power. He cast them down to the mortal plane as avatars, physical bodies containing their essence. and he said, "Recover the tablets of fate, or you're not coming back." Suddenly, gods walked among mortals, and gods could die. Part 3. The Time of Troubles. Imagine it. You're in a city, going about your day, and suddenly a god appears. Not in a vision, not in a dream, actually there. Physical, real, and confused, and angry, and in some cases completely insane from the sudden limitations. The time of troubles lasted for months in the year 1358 Doctor. It was chaos, divine chaos. Gods fought each other in the streets. Some tried to help mortals. Others became tyrants ruling small kingdoms. And adventurers, ordinary mortals with just enough skill and luck, found themselves capable of killing beings they'd worshipped their entire lives. Bane died first. The Black Lord, who preached fear and domination, met his end in the city of Tantras. His opponent was Thorm, a lawful good god of duty and righteousness. Everything Bane opposed. The battle was legendary. Two gods in avatar form, commanding followers, shaking the earth with their conflict. Thorm's worshippers saw their god struggling, and thousands of them made a choice. They sacrificed their lives willingly, channeling their life force into Thorm. They literally died so their god could be strong enough to kill the Lord of Darkness. It worked. Empowered by his followers' sacrifice, Thorm struck down Bane. The tyrant god fell, but Thorm died too. The effort of killing even an avatar of Bane was too much. Both gods perished. Thorm would later be resurrected by Au for his sacrifice and faithful service. Bane wouldn't be so fortunate, not immediately. Bhaal's death came differently, more personally. A group of adventurers had recovered one of the tablets of fate. They were trying to return it, traveling across Faerun. Pursued by gods who wanted the tablet for themselves, Bhaal caught them at a place called Boareskir Bridge, and the Lord of Murder did what he did best. He descended on them like a nightmare, tore through their guards, possessed the dying. Nothing could stop him, until a thief named Cyric, wielding a sword called Godsbane, stabbed Bhaal in the back. Here's the twist. Godsbane wasn't a sword. It was Mask, the god of thieves in disguise, one god killing another. Bhaal's avatar writhed, screamed, and exploded in a spray of divine energy and blood. The Lord of Murder was dead. That left Myrkul. The Lord of Bones had found both tablets of fate. He was ascending Mount Waterdeep, reaching for the celestial stairway that would let him return to the divine realms. Victory was within reach. And then a young mage named Midnight, channeling the power of Maestra, goddess of magic, cast Disintegrate. The spell struck Myrkul's avatar. Divine power met divine power. Myrkul disintegrated. His avatar dissolved into dust, a cloud of brown pestilence that fell over Waterdeep, killing plants and choking people. The Lord of Bones was destroyed. 3 gods, all dead. Their portfolios scattered to other deities, mainly to Cyric, who ascended to godhood, and briefly became one of the most powerful entities in the pantheon, by absorbing the domains of tyranny, murder, and death all at once. The time of troubles ended. The tablets were returned. Au destroyed them, revealing they'd been worthless all along, just symbols to remind the gods of their duties. New laws were enacted. From now on, a god's power would be tied directly to the number and fervor of their worshippers. The gods could no longer ignore mortals. Everyone thought the dead 3 were gone for good. But here's what no one realized. Here's the detail everyone missed. Dead gods don't stay dead. Not when they've prepared, not when they've built contingencies, not when they want something badly enough. The dead 3 would return. And when they did, they'd be ready to try again. Part 4, Resurrection and Conspiracy, Bane was first. In the year 1372 DR, something happened to Iaktu Chvim, Bane's half-demon son, who'd been ruling as a lesser god of tyranny. He was destroyed. Suddenly, violently, consumed from the inside out. Bane had been hiding inside Chvim all along, using his son as a cocoon, growing stronger, rebuilding his essence, and when he was ready, when he had enough power, he burst free like the worst possible butterfly. The Black Lord had returned. He reclaimed his portfolios from Ketheric, re-established his church, and got back to the business of tyranny. Bhaal took longer. His Bhaal-spawn children lived and died over decades. Each death released a fragment of his divine essence. Sometimes one Bhaal spawn would absorb another's essence, growing in power. This led to conflict. The Bhaal spawn crisis, chronicled in the first 2 Baldur's Gate games, where the children of Bhaal fought and murdered each other across Faerun. Eventually, all the Bhaal spawn died. The last ones perished after 1369 Doctor. And with their deaths, Bhaal's essence coalesced. He returned not at full power, but as a quasi-deity, diminished but present. The Lord of Murder was back. Myrkul's resurrection was the strangest. The Crown of Horns, that artifact containing fragments of his consciousness, passed from host to host. Each wearer heard whispers, felt influences. Myrkul wasn't truly alive, but he wasn't truly gone either. Then came the second sundering, a cosmic event that reshaped parts of reality. Myrkul returned during this event, restored as a god, though subordinate to Kelemvor, the new Lord of the Dead. By the mid-1400s DR, all 3 Dead 3 had returned. But something was different this time. Instead of residing primarily on the outer planes like most gods, they chose to remain on the material plane as quasi-deities. The lowest rank of divinity, barely more powerful than mortals with divine sparks. Why would 3 ambitious gods choose to be diminished? According to their followers and the few records we have, the stated reason was to be closer to their worshippers, to spread their influence more directly. But when we look at what happened next, another interpretation emerges. They may have been planning something that required direct presence, something that demanded hands-on manipulation of events. The timing alone suggests deliberation, though we can't know their true motivations with certainty. By 1492 DR, whatever they were planning was in motion, and it would require 3 mortals to serve as their hands in the world. Enter the Chosen. For Bane, Enver Gortash, born as Enver Flim, the son of cobblers in Baldur's Gate. His parents sold him as a child to a devil named Raphael. Young Enver spent his formative years in the House of Hope in Avernus, the first layer of the 9 hells. He was beaten when he cried. He witnessed broken souls and impossible deals. He learned how power really worked. Most children would be destroyed by this. Enver learned. He absorbed every lesson. And when he escaped back to Baldur's Gate, he became something far more dangerous than a traumatized child. He became an arms dealer, a manipulator, a political operator who understood that real power came from making yourself indispensable. He called himself Gortash now, and he impressed Bane so thoroughly that the Black Lord chose him as his chosen. For Bhaal, initially it was the Dark Urge. Not a Bhaal spawn in the traditional sense. This one was different. Bhaal created the Dark Urge directly from his own divine blood in a form of divine parthenogenesis. The perfect murder machine. The ultimate child. The Dark Urge was raised by foster parents who didn't know what they'd taken in. For a time, they had a normal childhood. Then the urge awakened, the compulsion to kill. The Dark Urge murdered their foster family in an indiscriminate slaughter and began their path to becoming the leader of the cult of Bhaal. Cold, efficient, strategic, the Dark Urge killed with purpose. They didn't revel in creative murders like some Bhaalists. They simply murdered, cleanly and often, in service to their father's larger goals. Bhaal called them his favored child, his chosen. For Myrkul, Ketheric Thorm, and his story is perhaps the most tragic of the three. Over a century before the main events of Baldur's Gate 3, Ketheric was a good man. He was a half-elf paladin of Selûne, goddess of the moon. He had a wife named Melodia and a daughter named Isabel. He governed Raithwin town fairly. He built moonrise towers as a temple to his goddess. Then Melodia died, and Ketheric's world cracked. But he had Isabel. He threw himself into being the best father he could be, raised her in the faith, taught her to be a cleric of Selûne. For a brief time his grief eased. Then Isabel died, murdered, and Ketheric broke completely. He cursed Selûne for abandoning him, turned to her dark sister, Shar, goddess of loss and darkness. Shar offered him oblivion, the gift of forgetting his pain. Ketheric became not just a Sharan, but a dark justiciar, one of Shar's elite warriors. Eventually, her chosen. He became tyrannical, persecuted Selûne worshippers, forced conversions to Shar, built a massive temple to darkness beneath Raithwin. Eventually, the Harpers and Druids allied to stop him. They defeated him in battle. As he fell, Ketheric unleashed a shadow curse that blighted the land for over a century. But death wasn't the end. Myrkul resurrected Ketheric, offered him something Shar never could, his daughter back. Ketheric agreed instantly. He would serve any god, break any oath, if it meant having Isabel again. He rose as an undead general. Myrkul granted him immortality by binding his life force to Dame Aelin, daughter of Selûne herself, imprisoned in the Shadowfell. As long as Aelin lived, Ketheric couldn't die. He became Myrkul's chosen. 3 chosen, each brilliant and dangerous in their own way, each damaged by their past, each willing to do whatever it took to serve their god's vision. And then the Dark Urge and Gortash met, and they hatched a plan that was absolutely insane. They would steal the crown of Karsus. Part 5. The Crown and the Brain. To understand why this was insane, you need to know what the Crown of Karsus is. In the year -339 DR, an archwizard named Karsus crafted an artifact that would let him cast a spell powerful enough to make him a god. Not metaphorically, actually divine. He would supplant Myrkul, goddess of magic, and take her place controlling the weave, the fundamental structure of magic itself. Karsus performed his spell. For one shining moment it worked. He became a god, and the weave collapsed. All magic stopped working. Everywhere. At once, Netheril, the greatest magical civilization ever, was a nation of flying cities. When magic stopped, they stopped flying. They fell. Thousands died in seconds. An entire civilization destroyed in moments. This event became known as Karsus's Folly. The crown survived but was shattered. 3 gems called Netherstones separated from it. It eventually came into the possession of Mephistopheles, an archdevil who kept it in his vault in the frozen hell of Caenia, surrounded by the most powerful defenses imaginable. Gortash and the Dark Urge stole it. They enlisted Helsik, a diabolist who knew the rituals to open portals to specific locations in the 9 hells. She opened a portal to Mephistopheles' vault. Gortash and the Dark Urge went through. They bypassed an archdevil's defenses, stole the crown, and escaped. This might be the greatest heist in recorded history. 2 mortals, admittedly chosen of gods, stole from one of the most powerful beings in the multiverse. But stealing it was only step 1. Beneath Moonrise Towers, in the shadow-cursed lands Ketheric ruled, there was a secret, an abandoned mind flayer colony. At its heart, an elder brain, the massive psionic entity that serves as the central intelligence of illithid colonies. This brain had been dormant for who knows how long, alone in the dark. They placed the crown of Karsus upon it. The effect was immediate. The elder brain awakened but transformed. The crown's netherese magic supercharged it, evolved it. It became something more, something new. It became the Netherbrain. And here's where the conspiracy gets clever. Those 3 netherstones that had separated from the crown during Karsus's folly, the Chosen had acquired them, 1 for each. These stones were attuned to the crown. Together they could control whoever wore it. In this case, the Netherbrain. The plan was elegant and horrifying. Create a false religion, the cult of the Absolute. The Absolute would be presented as a new god, offering power to its followers. The cult would recruit across Faerun. The mechanism? Modified illithid tadpoles. The Netherbrain could create tadpoles that, when implanted in someone's eye, would burrow into their brain but remain dormant. These tadpoles granted psionic powers, created a telepathic link to the Absolute, made the host feel chosen and special. The cult called these people true souls. They believed they were blessed. What they didn't know was that they were infected with illithid tadpoles that could be activated at any moment to transform them all into mind flayers simultaneously. Imagine it. Thousands of people across the Sword Coast, in positions of power and influence, all believing they're part of a holy movement. Then, on command, they all transform into illithids. An instant army of mind flayers ready to take over civilization from within. The 3 Chosen had specific roles. The Dark Urge would handle the murders, eliminate key opponents in Baldur's Gate, destabilize the city. Ketheric would raise an army from the shadow-cursed lands, march on Baldur's Gate, create a crisis. And Gortash would be the hero. His steel watch, mechanical constructs powered by infernal engines, would defend the city against Ketheric's army in a staged battle. Gortash would win, be proclaimed Archduke, given absolute authority. With Gortash controlling Baldur's Gate, with the cult spread throughout the region, with the Netherbrain ready to transform all true souls into mind flayers on command, the Dead 3 would achieve dominion over a massive portion of Faerun. It was brilliant. It was terrifying. It was working. And then it all fell apart because of jealousy, ambition, and a knife in the dark. Her name was Orin the Red, and she was about to ruin everything. Part 6. Betrayal and Blood. Orin's story is a nightmare from start to finish. She was the product of incest, born when Sarevok Anchef, a Bhaal himself, had a daughter with his own daughter Helena. Orin was both Sarevok's granddaughter and his daughter, both Helena's daughter and her niece. A twisted bloodline serving a god of murder. She grew up in the cult of Bhaal, surrounded by ritualistic killing. Never had a chance at normalcy. Was taught from birth that murder was sacred, that Bhaal's approval was all that mattered. She was also a changeling, able to shapeshift, making her incredibly dangerous. But Orin wasn't the leader of the cult. The Dark Urge held that position, Bhaal's perfect creation, his favored child. And this ate at Orin like acid. She believed she was more devoted to Bhaal than the Dark Urge could ever be. She had his blood in her veins. The Dark Urge killed efficiently, strategically. Orin thought murder should be art. Theatrical. Creative. She believed the Dark Urge was boring, missing the point, unworthy, and she wanted to prove it. When Orin was 7 years old, her mother Helena tried to kill her. Sarevok had told Helena to sacrifice Orin to prove her devotion to Bhaal. Helena tried, but 7-year-old Orin was too skilled, too vicious. The child killed her own mother instead. This shaped Orin fundamentally. Trust was weakness. Family would betray you. Only the strongest survive. Only Bhaal's approval matters. So Orin plotted. She watched the dark urge, waited for her moment. And then, when the conspiracy was well underway, she struck. She used the blade of the first blood, a sacred dagger of the cult of Bhaal. She attacked the dark urge from behind, splitting open their skull. But she didn't want them dead. She wanted them to suffer, to lose everything. As the dark urge lay dying, Orin implanted one of the modified illithid tadpoles into their brain. The same tadpoles the conspiracy was using for true souls. The tadpole burrowed in, interacting with the massive head wound, causing catastrophic brain damage. The dark urge's memories were destroyed. Their identity shattered. They became an amnesiac, unable to remember who they were or what they'd done. Even the urge, the compulsion to murder, was reduced to manageable levels. Orin claimed the position of Bhaal's chosen for herself. Gortash and Ketheric pragmatically accepted this. What choice did they have? The conspiracy had to continue. But Orin was erratic, unpredictable. She killed not to advance the plan, but because she wanted to. She threatened Gortash directly, infiltrating his quarters in disguise, making it clear she'd kill him if she could. The only thing stopping her were the Netherstones themselves, which prevented the Chosen from directly attacking each other. The carefully laid plan was becoming chaotic. And then a Nautiloid ship crashed near Baldur's gate, survivors stumbling from the wreckage with tadpoles in their heads. One of those survivors was the Dark Urge, memory wiped, powerless. The conspiracy was fracturing, and it would start truly falling apart with the death of Ketheric Thorm. Part 7. The Fall. Ketheric was supposed to be invincible. That was Myrkul's gift. As long as Dame Aelin remained imprisoned, Ketheric couldn't die. Every wound healed, every fatal blow reversed. But a group of adventurers, infected with the modified tadpoles but somehow maintaining free will, discovered the secret. They found Aelin, freed her, and suddenly Ketheric was mortal. Still powerful, still dangerous, still an undead general animated by divine power. But mortal. The battle at Moonrise Towers was everything the conspiracy had built toward, except Ketheric was on the losing side. The adventurers fought through his forces. Aelin, freed and furious, channeled Seluna's divine power against the man who'd imprisoned her for a century. Ketheric retreated into the Mind Flayer colony beneath Moonrise Towers. There, in a chamber pulsing with psionic energy, the adventurers caught up. Gortash and Orin were there too. The three chosen together for what might be the last time. They were already arguing. Gortash was furious that Orin's erratic murders were drawing too much attention. Orin was threatening to kill him. Ketheric was trying to keep them focused on the immediate threat. They used their Netherstones in unison, commanding the Netherbrain to send its armies against Baldur's gate. The plan was accelerating, happening now, ready or not. Then Gortash and Orin left for Baldur's gate. Ketheric stayed to deal with the adventurers. The battle was brutal. Without his invincibility, Ketheric was beatable. As he fell, mortally wounded, he called to Myrkul, begged for help, for power, for anything. Myrkul answered. The Lord of Bones possessed Ketheric's dying body, transforming him into a massive avatar of bone and death. The Apostle of Myrkul. It was Myrkul himself fighting directly in the mortal realm. The fight was one of the most difficult battles imaginable. Myrkul's avatar was immense, powerful, surrounded by an aura that prevented healing. But gods can die. The adventurers had proven that before. The Apostle of Myrkul fell. The construct collapsed, and from the wreckage, Ketheric's mortal body reappeared, broken and dying. His last words were about Isabel, the daughter he'd done all this for, the daughter who'd rejected him. He died alone, his god silent. The adventurers took Ketheric's netherstone, one of 3. The alliance was broken, and the Netherbrain, that immense psionic entity crowned with an artifact that once destroyed a civilization, began to slip its bonds. It was still following the general command to march on Baldur's gate. But it was also starting to think for itself, to have its own ambitions. Gortash tried to negotiate with the adventurers, proposed an alliance to stop Orin, reclaim her stone, then control the Netherbrain together. Some versions of events say the alliance was accepted, others that it was refused. But regardless, Gortash's fate was sealed. In some timelines, he survives until the final confrontation and reaches the Netherbrain with the adventurers, still believing he can salvage the situation, can use his Netherstone, reassert control, and the brain kills him, instantly, with a single psionic command: die. The chosen of Bane, who'd risen from an abused child in hell to the most powerful man in Baldur's gate, dies without dignity, without even understanding what went wrong. And here's where it gets really interesting. If you cast Speak with Dead on Gortash's corpse, you don't speak to Gortash. You speak to Bane. The god himself answers, confirming that Gortash's soul belongs to him now, that the plan was always meant to elevate Bane above all others, that Gortash served his purpose until he didn't. The dead 3 don't care about their chosen as people. They're tools, useful until they're not. That leaves Orin, the last chosen, the one who shouldn't have been there at all. The confrontation happens in the Temple of Bhaal, deep beneath Baldur's gate. Orin is waiting, holding a hostage. She demands a duel, one-on-one. Winner becomes Bhaal's true chosen. Loser becomes a sacrifice. If the adventurer is the dark urge, this is personal. Orin is fighting the person she betrayed, whose place she stole. During the fight, Orin can be told the truth, that Sarevok ordered Helena to kill her when she was 7, that Helena tried to sacrifice her own daughter to prove devotion to Bhaal, that everything Orin believes about loyalty and family is built on lies. If you reveal this successfully, she breaks. The truth shatters her, and Bhaal, seeing his chosen faltering, intervenes. He transforms Orin into the Slayer, a monstrous avatar of pure violence. The fight is brutal. When Orin falls, she dies not as a triumphant villain, but as a victim of the same god she served her entire life. After Orin's death, if the adventurer is the dark urge, Bhaal speaks directly. His avatar appears in the reflection of Orin's blood. He offers a choice: accept his blessing, become his chosen again, gain incredible power, the Slayer form, the spell power word kill, command of the cult, or refuse. Reject Bhaal completely, be free of the urge forever. Accepting means power but isolation. Jaheira and Minsk, heroes who fought Bhaal's forces in previous games, immediately turn hostile. Other companions disapprove. You become Bhaal's perfect instrument. Refusing means death. Bhaal kills you instantly, drains the divine essence he placed in you. But then Withers appears, the mysterious undead who's been helping the adventurers. He brings the dark urge back to life, free from Bhaal's influence. He states that the choice to stand against true evil, to reject a god's command even at the cost of death, is extraordinary, worth intervening for. Based on various clues, Withers is almost certainly Jergal, the ancient god who gave up his throne to the dead 3,000 years ago. who's been watching ever since. With all 3 chosen dead or freed, with all 3 Netherstones claimed, the path is clear. The final confrontation with the Netherbrain can begin. Part 8. Judgment. The Netherbrain has fully escaped control. It's no longer following anyone's orders. Its plan is simple. Convert everyone into illithids. Create an empire of mind flayers. Rule absolutely. The adventurers, with every ally they've gathered, launch an assault. The city burns. Dragons attack. Nautiloids bombard streets. It's apocalyptic. They fight their way to the brain. Use the 3 Netherstones to cast Karsus's compulsion, dominating the crown. A portal opens into the Netherbrain's psyche, its mental landscape made manifest. Inside, they face the unbreakable will of the Netherbrain, a conceptual entity representing its determination, its resolve, its absolute certainty in its right to rule. When it falls, when the Netherbrain is defeated, there's one final choice. Command it to destroy itself and all the tadpoles, freeing everyone. Or take control, become the absolute in truth, rule over everyone infected. Most choose freedom. The brain dies. The crown of Karsus falls into the river. The tadpoles lose potency. Baldur's Gate is saved. Part 9. The question answered. But there's one more scene. A post-credits scene that changes everything you've just heard. Withers stands before a mural of the Dead 3. He speaks to them directly, not to their followers, not to their chosen, to the gods themselves. His words are carefully chosen. Thou thought to hijack the very flower of all souls. Thou would have seen all reduced to grist for thy mill. I will not permit it. The hells and gods may promise power unending, but the mortal that refuses such things has power of his own. I suspect we are in accord here. He continues, I worked to assemble those who might resist thee, and here, I confess, I must pause to admire mine own handiwork. I overestimated thee. I thought thee worthy of a true challenge, yet thine grand design was but a folly. When people became mind flayers, their souls were destroyed. Did you think the other gods would not notice? That Kalimvor, the Lord of the Dead, would not intervene when souls stopped reaching his domain. He answers with a pronouncement. Ye are doomed to eternal failure, and soon ye will not even have that. Ye shall be forgotten, and there is no greater death than that. And then, almost as an afterthought, he adds, there will be consequences for this. Kalimvor shan't be pleased. Now, here's what makes this scene extraordinary. Throughout the entire game, Withers has been helping you, reviving dead companions cheaply, allowing class changes, providing hirelings, supporting your journey. And if you've played as the Dark Urge and rejected Bhaal, Withers personally brought you back from death, defying a god's will to do so. We find him in the dank crypt, in an ancient temple to Jergal. The same Jergal who gave up his throne to the dead 3,000 of years ago. A journal in Act 2's Grand Mausoleum describes someone meeting Jergal, who asks them the exact question Withers asks you. What is the worth of a single mortal's life? Withers has divine power. Paladins who examine him detect divinity. He cannot be harmed. He states that fate has not declared mine injury, therefore it shall not occur. He resurrects the dead with ease, charges only 200 gold when such resurrections should cost thousands. The game never explicitly confirms it, but the evidence is overwhelming. Withers is Jergal, or at minimum, an avatar or manifestation of Jergal, which means the ancient god of death has been personally guiding you throughout your entire journey. Think about what that means. Reframe everything you've experienced through this lens. Jergal willingly gave up his throne to 3 ambitious mortals thousands of years ago. He watched them become gods, watched them die in the time of troubles, watched them return. And when they began their conspiracy with the Netherbrain and the crown of Karsus, Jergal didn't stop them directly. He assembled mortals who could. He found you. Whether you were the dark urge needing redemption, or Tav needing purpose, or another origin character with your own struggles, he made sure you survived the Nautiloid crash. He revealed himself in the dank crypt and joined your camp. He kept you alive through every battle, resurrecting you when you fell. He was managing your adventure like a chess game, positioning pieces, providing support, ensuring you had the tools and allies needed to reach the Dead Three's chosen and the Netherbrain itself. And here's the truly profound part. He did it by empowering mortals to make their own choices. Remember that question? What is the worth of a single mortal's life? Jergal's answer, demonstrated through action rather than words: a mortal life is worth more than any god's ambition. One person choosing to resist evil, choosing to help others, choosing to sacrifice for the greater good, is worth more than 3 gods' millennia-long conspiracy. The Dead Three's answer to that question was always nothing. Mortals were tools, pawns, resources to be used and discarded. Gortash saw people as assets to manipulate. Bhaal saw them as offerings. Myrkul saw them as future subjects for his domain of death. Their chosen reflected this. Ketheric sacrificed thousands for a ghost of his daughter. Gortash built weapons that consumed people's souls. Orin murdered for art, for approval, seeing victims as canvas rather than people. But you proved something different. That mortals could resist mind control, that they could reject God's commands even when obedience promised power, that they could choose sacrifice over domination. Every companion who fought beside you made that choice. Shadowheart rejecting Shah, Lae'zel questioning Vlaakith, Astarion choosing not to become Cazador, Gale refusing the crown of Karsus, Will defying Mizora, Karlach staying true to herself despite her engine and her fate. And if you played the Dark Urge and rejected Bhaal, you literally died rather than serve evil, chose oblivion over power, and Jergal brought you back specifically because that choice mattered, because you answered his question with your life itself. That's the twist. The recontextualization of everything. This was never about the Dead Three's conspiracy. It was about proving them wrong, about demonstrating that their fundamental assumption, the belief that mortals are worthless except as tools, was false. Jergal gave up his throne because he was weary. Yes, the texts confirm that. But perhaps he was also weary of that philosophy, of treating death and life as nothing but paperwork, as transactions without meaning. So he let 3 mortals take his power to see what they'd do with it. And when they proved that power without wisdom leads to the same patterns of failure, he found mortals who could demonstrate wisdom without power. You weren't just defeating a conspiracy. You were proving that the Dead Three's entire worldview was wrong, that mortals aren't tools, that choice matters, that one person refusing to be controlled is more powerful than 3 gods demanding obedience. I overestimated thee, Jergal tells the Dead Three, not because they weren't powerful enough, but because he thought they might learn, might change, might eventually understand what he learned during his eons as Lord of the End of Everything. Power means nothing without purpose. Control is an illusion, and the worth of a single mortal life is incalculable because mortals can choose, can change, can become more than what they were made to be. The Dead Three never learned that lesson. They failed the same test 3 times across thousands of years, And Jergal finally declares, "Ye are doomed to eternal failure." Not eternal punishment, eternal failure. They'll keep trying, keep using the same methods, keep seeing mortals as tools, and they'll keep failing because they're incapable of understanding why those methods don't work. That's the real tragedy of the Dead Three. Not that they're evil, but that they're stuck, trapped in patterns they can't recognize, much less break, doomed to repeat their mistakes forever, never understanding that the problem isn't their tools or tactics. The problem is their answer to Jergal's question. And now you know why that question mattered. Why it threads through the entire story. Why Jergal asks it at the beginning and answers it at the end. Because the Dead Three's conspiracy, their return from death, their manipulation of Chosen and Tadpoles and Elder Brains, all of it was ultimately an attempt to prove that their answer was correct. That mortals are worthless. That power is all that matters. That gods should rule and mortals should obey. And you proved them wrong, not by being powerful, but by choosing to be good. Epilogue: The Pattern and the Future. Here's what makes the Dead Three's story so compelling. It's not just about evil gods trying to conquer the world, it's about a pattern, a cycle that repeats. As mortals they sought power from Jergal, succeeded through ambition and violence. As gods, they sought greater power by stealing the Tablets of Fate, died for their ambition. As resurrected deities, they sought ultimate power through the Netherbrain conspiracy, failed again. Each time, the same qualities that allowed them to succeed initially became their downfall. Bane's need for absolute control made him incapable of accepting allies as equals. Bhaal's obsession with murder made his followers unstable. Myrkul's embrace of death and undeath made him underestimate the value of life and change. And each time, they were undone by their own tools. The tablets led to Ao's punishment. The Bhaalpon contingency led to internal conflict. The Netherbrain slipped its bonds. There's a lesson about tyranny here. True control is impossible. The more tightly you grip, the more slips through. The Dead Three never learned this. They kept trying the same strategy with different tools. What about the Chosen? What do their fates tell us? Ketheric's story is about grief corrupting. He was a good man who lost everything. Each time he tried to fill that void, he compromised more of who he was. He died having lost everything he fought for. Gortash's story is about ambition without empathy. He was brilliant, cunning, strategic, but he saw people as tools. He thought he could control everything if he was clever enough. He died instantly, killed by the tool he thought he'd mastered. Orin's story is the most tragic. Born from incest, raised in a murder cult, told her entire life that Bhaal's approval was all that mattered. She never had a choice. Even her ambition was just desperately seeking validation from a god who saw her as nothing but a tool. When she learned the truth, she broke. And Bhaal used her even in that breaking. And the Dark Urge? Their story is about choice. They were created to be a murderer, had no childhood that wasn't tainted by violence. Their entire existence was defined by an urge they didn't choose, but they could still choose whether to embrace that urge or fight it, whether to serve Bhaal or reject him, even if rejection meant death. That choice, that ability to say no even to a god who created you, is what Jergal found extraordinary. Because in a world of gods and monsters, of cosmic schemes and divine power, the thing that mattered most was a simple moral choice. The choice to be better than what you were made to be. The Dead Three's conspiracy failed because they never understood this. They saw mortals as tools, as puppets to be controlled. They never considered that mortals might choose to resist, even when resistance seemed impossible. So that's the story of the Dead Three's dark pact, revealed in full. From ambitious mortals who challenged a death god, to deities who overreached and died, to resurrected gods who tried one more time. And through it all, a fourth god watching, waiting, eventually assembling the pieces needed to prove them wrong. Now that you understand what Jergal revealed, the pattern becomes even clearer. As mortals, the Dead Three sought power from Jergal. They succeeded through ambition and violence, taking what was offered. As gods, they sought greater power by stealing the tablets of fate. They died for their ambition, killed by Ao's punishment. As resurrected deities, they sought ultimate power through the Netherbrain conspiracy. They failed again, undone by the very mortals they saw as tools. Each iteration, the same fundamental flaw. They never valued mortal choice. They never saw people as anything but resources. And each time they were defeated by mortals who chose differently. Thorm's followers who sacrificed themselves willingly. Cyric wielding a god disguised as a sword. Midnight channeling Maestra's power. And finally, adventurers with tadpoles in their heads who simply refused to give up. The Dead Three kept changing their tactics, but never their philosophy. They refined their tools, but not their thinking. They learned how to survive death itself, but never learned why they kept failing in the first place. Here's what their chosen's fates teach us, viewed through the lens of Jergal's question. Ketheric's story is about grief corrupting everything it touches. He was a good man who lost his loved ones and filled that void by compromising everything he believed. He died having lost not just his family, but his principles, his faith, and finally himself. His answer to what is the worth of a mortal life became, nothing compared to my pain. Gortash's story is about ambition without empathy. He was brilliant, strategic, capable of incredible feats, but people were always just pieces on a board to him. He thought intelligence and planning could control everything. He died instantly, killed by the very tool he believed he'd mastered. His answer was, "Mortals are worth whatever I can use them for." Orin's story remains the most tragic. She never had a chance to develop her own answer. Born from incest, raised in a murder cult, told from birth that only Bhaal's approval mattered. Even her ambition was just seeking validation from a god who saw her as disposable. Her worth, in her own eyes and her god's, was measured only in how artistically she could kill. And the dark urge? Their story is about discovering that the question even matters. Created to be a perfect murder machine, defined by an urge they didn't choose, expected to kill until they were the last being alive. But through amnesia, through companions, through choices made without the weight of their past, they could learn a different answer. When the dark urge rejects Bhaal and dies for it, they're answering Jergal's question with their life. A mortal's worth is infinite because they can choose to be more than what they were created to be, even if that choice costs everything. That's why Jergal intervenes, not because the dark urge is special or powerful, but because that choice, that willingness to die rather than serve evil, is exactly what the Dead Three have never understood in millennia of existence. So where does this leave us? Jergal says the Dead Three will trouble the realms no more. Given his authority and his track record, we should take that seriously. But he also said they're doomed to eternal failure, not eternal imprisonment or destruction. The distinction matters. They still exist. They still have followers. They still have power, even if diminished. The most likely interpretation, based on what we know, they'll continue to exist, continue to scheme, continue to try the same fundamentally flawed strategies with different tools, but they'll keep failing because they can't learn the lesson, can't change their answer to the question. They're gods trapped in mortal patterns of thinking, immortal beings locked into mortal flaws, forever powerful, forever failing, forever unable to understand why. Meanwhile, mortals will continue to surprise them, continue choosing compassion over control, continue proving that one person's choice to stand against darkness matters more than all the power gods can offer. That's the legacy of the Dead Three's conspiracy. Not the gods themselves, but the people who stood against them, the companions who chose to change, the heroes who refused to be controlled, the ordinary mortals who looked at gods demanding obedience and said no. The Dead Three started as 3 mortals who wanted to be gods. They achieved that, died, returned, created increasingly elaborate conspiracies to prove their philosophy correct. And every time, they were undone by mortals who embodied a different answer to Jergal's question. What is the worth of a single mortal's life? The Dead Three's answer: nothing, except as a tool for greater beings. Jergal's answer, demonstrated through millennia of watching and one perfectly orchestrated adventure: everything. Because mortals can choose, can change, can become heroes not through power, but through decision after decision to do what's right even when it costs them everything. That's why the conspiracy failed. Not because the heroes were stronger, but because they understood something the Dead Three never will. Power comes from what you choose to do with it. And the choice to protect others, to sacrifice for the greater good, to refuse domination even when offered power, is stronger than any crown, any artifact, any divine command. Even when gods forge their pacts and lay their plans, there will always be mortals who remember what matters. Not power, not control, not domination. People. The Dead Three were gods who forgot they were once mortal, who kept trying to control what couldn't be controlled, who built empires on foundations of fear and blood and death. They failed because they never learned what Jergal learned long ago, that one mortal choosing to resist evil is worth more than all the power of the gods combined. And perhaps, after thousands of years of watching them fail the same test repeatedly, Jergal decided it was time to prove it one final time. He found mortals who could answer his question correctly, who could demonstrate through action what the Dead Three could never understand through power. And in doing so, he reminded the entire multiverse of a simple truth. Gods may be powerful, but mortals are free. And freedom, wielded with wisdom and compassion, will always triumph over tyranny, even divine tyranny, even when it wears 3 faces and calls itself inevitable. Thank you for joining me on this deep dive into one of the darkest and most compelling storylines in Baldur's Gate 3. The Dead Three's conspiracy spans millennia, from ancient games of chance to the streets of Baldur's Gate, from Jergal's throne room to the fall of the Netherbrain. But more than that, I hope you now understand why that one question threads through everything, why Withers asks it at the beginning, why the entire story is really about answering it. What is the worth of a single mortal's life? The Dead Three answered, nothing. Jergal answered, everything. And you, through your choices in the game, get to answer it yourself. If you enjoyed this lore journey, please subscribe to the channel for more deep dives into the Forgotten Realms and beyond. Like the video if it helped you understand the game's story better. And let me know in the comments what other lore topics you'd like me to explore. Until next time, sleep well. And remember, in a world of gods and monsters, the choices of mortals matter most.